Welcome to the Modeling Lifestyle, where we celebrate how modelers have embraced their modeling and friendships as a lifestyle. We discuss how modeling can become a life passion and lead to lifelong friendships. The goal of the modeling lifestyle is to preserve the modeling and interests of leading modelers in the modeling industry. The modeling lifestyle is sponsored by NGNC, a market leader in quarter-inch scale modeling with products from over 50 vendors and the largest collection of out-of-stock model paints with over 9,000 bottles available. And now to Jim Kellow, MMR and host of the Modeling Lifestyle.
I love the sound of a whistle.
Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We really hope that you enjoy the show, and we hope you come back often and tell your friends about us so they can join us too. This show introduces you not just to great modelers, but to people who have really made major contributions to our hobby and where modeling has become really a major part of their normal lifestyle. I want to thank you so much for joining us this evening again. We really do appreciate it. All of our shows are done by volunteers, and if you have a little time that you could donate to us, we sure could use all the help we can get. We also we don't charge anything for our shows or our videos, but if we do have a Patreon account, and if you can see your way clear to contribute a few dollars here or there to help us cover our out-of-pocket expenses for the Zoom show and our website and so forth, we sure would appreciate it. But most of all, we appreciate your help as a volunteer to help run the shows and to produce them for us. As I said, we're all volunteers. And last year, for the first time, we started raising money for a scholarship for young model railroaders who are going to continue their education in a STEM program. We were able to raise $1,000, all of it from volunteers. And we were also able to raise enough to pay for the governmental fees and cost of acquiring a 501c3 designation. So in the future, all of your contributions to our scholarship will be tax deductible for you. But the $1,000 we raised, that didn't have any tax deductibility. That was just out of your generosity to help us get the program off the ground. Not only did you help us get it off the ground, but we were also able to cover all of the costs that our attorneys who were doing the work pro bono for us needed to pay the IRS and the state of Florida to establish the corporation and to get the 501c3 designation. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it. But right now we're concentrating not on fundraising, but on getting the word out to qualified applicants to apply for our scholarship. The more that apply, the better we like it. And we want to make sure that model railroaders all have a chance to hear about it and know that we're trying to develop a program that we think is going to be extremely beneficial to them in the future, even more so than our $1,000 scholarship this year. So we've been to various shows around the country. We have a QR code. If you link on the QR code, you go immediately to our website. You can apply through our website. We've tried to make it, you download the application. We tried to make it as easy as we possibly can for the applicants because we want to make sure that we communicate best we can to every model railroader out there who's in college or starting their college career in one of the STEAM programs. So if you can help us by getting the word out, we sure would appreciate that too. Well, with all of that said, I want to introduce you to tonight's guest and what a treat you have in store for you. Charlie Rausch, MMR, is not just a very creative and artistic and beautiful modeler, not physically beautiful, but his models are outstanding and beautiful. But he's also a major promoter of our hobby and has helped innumerable people improve their skills and knowledge about the great hobby of model railroading. So Charlie, welcome.
Thank you.
And could you tell us a little bit about who Charlie Rausch is?
Well, I was born and raised in Astoria, New York, which is right on the East River, right across from Manhattan, right near the Hellgate Bridge. My parents were German immigrants, hardworking. I went to parochial grade and high schools, went to Queens College on a scholarship, and I went through. I completed my education with an MBA out of the Baruch City University of New York, and I was trained in both mathematics, accounting, and music. I think music first, then the other two businesses came about. Okay. And I kind of had about 40 some odd years in the IT field, and at the last 10 years I was a consultant in IT, and I retired in 2005, and I have never looked back. I mean, I can't believe the amount of how much modeling I got done while I was working, because I mean, I'm telling you, it was amazing. So that's a little bit about me.
Okay, how did you? What drew you to model railroading? I mean, there are a lot of hobbies out there that anybody can participate in. Why model railroading?
Well, I have to tell you, my dad always liked trains, and so when he had a chance to buy a house during the war, the World War II, he bought a house, and I mean, it was right at the where the grade from the ground grade went to the up to the Hellgate Bridge. And I saw as a baby, all right, from the kitchen window, I saw all of the trains that ran over the Hellgate Bridge. And so I have to tell you, that was fascinating. And he would point things out to me. And then he would drive around, and we would always be looking for steam engines. He loved steam engines. And he built me an 027 Lionel layout like most kids got. And I have to tell you, and we went out on vacation trips. Every year we would look for steam engines, whether it was on the Long Island or in the Pennsylvania, in New Jersey or in Pennsylvania. It was very fascinating. And what really drew me to the hobby, I got involved. I think I was bedridden with some kind of pneumonia or something. And he bought me, I must have been all of about 7 or 8. And he bought me a couple of kits to build. And they weren't planes or boats. They were the Strombacher wooden trains. And it started out with the old time trains like the DeWitt Clinton and the Pioneer and the William Galloway. And then later on into the HO varieties. And I was fascinated. I built those and they were fascinating. I loved just building them. I liked the size of the HO. And one day my brother and I were walking around the Sunnyside yards which was the Pennsylvania yards in Sunnyside or Queens, which is what was right near, it was walking distance from where I lived. And we were walking around and we saw the GG1s and the box cabs and the little box cab switchers. And we walked past a train store, a hobby shop. And in the window of the hobby shop were these two little B1 B1 060 electric switchers with the pantograph, one pantograph on top. And it was running around this layout. Look, that's it, the little Fomoco. And this was a interesting locomotive, but I had 2 of them, and they were running around this layout, and they were ideal cardboard buildings on that layout. And I must tell you, I looked at that and I was fascinated. I said, look at this. It's got 2 rails, and the rail looks like real rail. I said to my brother, I said, look at the wheels and the trucks. They have springs in it, and the knuckles, couplers. I said, this looks like a great thing. And so we went inside, and I kept going back and forth to that hobby shop. And then, no, I couldn't afford that. That engine was, I think, $15 or $16. Yeah. But I could afford a Mantua booster for $8.50. So I played guitar and entertained some kids in a daycare place that was across from where I lived. And she would give me a quarter or 50 cents, $1 every time I did this. And I saved up my pennies. And I actually bought a Mantua booster, and I was thrilled. So, hey, that started it, and it hasn't stopped. Okay. So, and I guess I was about 10 at the time. So it's a fascinating hobby. I've always loved it. And as with most young men. Sometime in our teenage years, we find out about girls, music, and cars, and so you have a little respite in between. But that changes again as soon as you get a little settled, and you come right back. And I came right back, and the Mantua booster was still in the box, as was the Bowser L1 Mikado and the Varney cars and all the other ones that I had. And eventually they went around the Christmas tree, and then eventually they went into a little 4x8 in the basement, and the hobby kept growing, and that's why I love it.
Sorry, that's interesting stories. It really is. What scale? You started in HO, and you still model HO? What scales have you modeled?
This is, I like all aspects of our hobby. So yeah, I had a big HO layout. It was, I think it was 14 by 65, and lots of operations, and Northeast modeling, and I had that. And then I got involved with a gentleman who wanted to convert his HO to ON3. And this was before the land of ON30, folks. Okay, so Charlie his name was Charlie too. And Charlie could have been my father. Okay, I lost my dad pretty early in his life. So I kind of found Charlie, and Charlie, he went to Colorado, and he rode on the Durango Silverton, and he rode on the Coombers and Toltec. And when he came back, we went to a train show together, and he saw a display layout of ON3. And this was, I believe, in early 1980s. And he looked at that and he said, I love that size. And he said, we're going to sell all my HO, and we're going to build an ON3 layout. And well, I got to tell you, I got hooked on ON3. And it wasn't until 2000 that I went to Colorado and rode on the Durango and Silverton and the Coombers and Toltec that I understood what Charlie meant about narrow gauge. So, hey, the rest is history. I still have a wall full of HO trains. I love them. I build in them. And my main railroad is ON3.
What aspect do you most enjoy about model railroading, Charlie?
Well, one of the things about this hobby, okay, that I found really interesting is that there's so many aspects of it. I mean, I started building the dollar cars in model railroader real early, real early. Then I found the Ambroid kits and the Silver Street kits. So I liked the car building model. I really was building cars. Then I kind of liked, all of these HO engines, they don't look like the real thing here. I mean, the Mantua, I've never seen an engine that looked like a Mantua booster. However, I've seen, but my Penline L1 looked like a Pennsy L1 that I saw on running on the Long Island. I said, oh, why don't we have more engines that look exactly like the prototype? So I really started thinking about modifying steam engines and making exactly prototypical. I mean, whether it's taking a Mantua Pacific and converting it to a CNJ G3 Pacific, with Alesco feed water heaters. I learned how to do this stuff pretty early on. And then I discovered brass engines. And, when you discover brass engines, that's a whole other story, so that now we learned how to, because I read the articles by Bill Sharp and the articles by Mel Thornburg and on building all these. And I was fascinated. I said, I would love to get the skills for that. So the engine building got involved after I was doing that, doing the cars. And then I said, structures. I like the structures, the John Allen structures, the ones that were behind on the last page of Model Railroad. You remember the Varney ads that had so many of John Allen's structures? Fabulous. So I got hooked on building structures. So we're building. We're doing building. Then I started. So aspects, right? I like the electrical because I was very early into a PFM sound and putting in the sound modules for PFM, and for Charlie's layout, that other fella, and we had full running PFM sound. Sounded like as if there was a steam engine in the basement because he had speakers that were 3 feet tall. I mean, it shook the whole world. So the electronic aspects took over, and I have really I love every part of it. The only thing I don't really care for is maybe ballasting track. It's one of those things.
I understand.
So yeah, I worked this afternoon. I worked on putting a decoder in one of my friend's engines. Another day I worked on something else, and yeah, I jump around, and I love doing all the different things in this hobby. I really do enjoy the variety of tasks that you can find and areas that you can just be creative in.
I would agree. And beautifully said, no question about it. Well, Charlie, you're such a well-known modeler, but a lot of people may never have seen any of your models. So let's take a break here a minute and see a few of them and have you tell us what we're looking at. Now, which is
Oh,
this?
you have a video. This is a cute. Now, I built this engine for Charlie White in 1986. It is a Chemtron kit. It's a brass kit that had it's a tough brass kit to build. And Charlie did not like the old box headlights and the appliances that were from the old style engine that the model portrayed. So he convinced me. He says, "Well, I want to update that." So we did. So we put brakes on it because the original locomotive never had brakes. The guy would stop the engine by reversing it. So they literally did not have brakes, these engines. And we added electric headlights, air compressors, a little bit more piping, a little bit more detail, but we have a can motor in it. We had originally had PFM sound in it, but I converted that into a DCC back in 2010, 2011. DCC is a whole other aspect of life, and I can't believe how I ever played with trains without DCC. So now you can see some of the structures on the layout. That structure you see in the foreground, the freight station, is really two Lionel Rico portions of the Rico station that were hatched together, because I took the Rico station and I kept the two end walls and I made a standalone Rico station, and I wound up with these two freight houses, and so I just kind of glued them together. Now, the other thing behind it, I think, is American Model Builders or Ameritown. I think that's called Ameritown. Those were O-gauge buildings that, again, we use all sorts of techniques to build them and modify them and kit bash them. So that's good. And it's a good example of that. So so that gives you an idea of that. You can see the Lionel station in the corner.
Yep. Next.
Oh, okay. Here's an engine. This is a project engine that I built started building in 1999 with a friend of mine. This fellow, Joe Borick, he passed away. Joe Borick and I both loved Camelback engines, and we both liked the New York, Ontario, and Western, which is a kind of a really minority road and one of the first railroads to become dieselized in 1947. But one of the engines that they had was this engine, was called a P-class or an Ori. And it was a heavy consolidation. Nobody ever made an imported model of that. And somebody, Nickel Plate used to import a couple of Ontario and Western engines, but we said that we want to build one of these. So the two of us started building these engines together at the same time, and we were talking about it. And it's a kit bash engine, a brass based engine. The entire superstructure is all scratch built. The tender is completely scratch built, but the mechanism is from a train's Rio Grande C48 280 because that was a very particular engine we wanted to use the mechanisms of. So we scrounged around from train show to train show looking for junker or locomotives that were damaged and to find a cheap mechanism for that locomotive. And I actually found the C48, and Joe found another one like that too. And so we both built the engine based on that frame, on that mechanism. Now that mechanism, if you notice, it has a Baker valve gear, and it has the special, what I call backwards Baker, where the eccentric levers and by the crosshead go backwards instead of forwards. And very hard to find. It's very unique Baker valve gear. Having found that, I knew I could build this engine, and Joe built it at the same time. So the two of us built them together. Unfortunately, Joe had health issues, and he passed away, and he never finished it. I did finish this in 2016, and it was the first engine I ever had given to the NMRA at a convention for judging, and that engine won 108 points, and I was on my way. I thought that was going to be the way to go. So this one is very special to me, and I have a buddy here who's I go to operating sessions with, and he said that is the holy grail of O&W locomotives.
It's beautiful work. No question.
Well, I was thrilled. I was thrilled with that. I love this engine. I turned the domes myself. It's got all the right things. The cab was all scratch built. The whole thing is scratch built, other than the mechanism. So it's part of one of the darlings that I have.
Absolutely, I can understand why.
Yes. Well, again, now we have another O&W engine. This is another one of those hard to find models. Now this one again is a brass bashing. I took one of the West Side Santa Fe early 210-2s. I needed the mechanism for that, and I actually found two of those locomotives. John Sokash, one of my buddies who's on the screen here, he has the other one, and I built this locomotive using a USRA boiler from a heavy Mikado, because I said that kind of looks like a fat bull moose boiler. So I started that, found a way to get that special inside bearing trailing truck, and I just built this model, and I showed this I also had this judged at a convention in a couple of years ago, and it also won first place and enough merit awards. Again, that's the second locomotive that I need for the motive power. Got me going. And John Sokash, one of my buddies that are going to be on the show tonight, he is in the process of building one just like it. And we've been working together on that one, his together, for a while now. His is all brass right now, and we have to work on the right side. We've gotten the left side almost done. So it's a project. We love it.
You should. It's beautiful work. Just outstanding.
Yeah, I said I like building cars, right? He's a good example of building cars. I decided, I was reading well, I went to the Durango and Silverton and the Cumbers and Toltec, and they had a string of these stock cars, and I took photos of them. I was fascinated by these cars, and I said, I wonder what it would take to build the car exactly the way the prototype was built.
Yeah.
So I did. I built this car board by board, and it has all the bolts that are necessary. That is, if you wanted to build this car and you didn't glue it, you could bolt it together. Right? I mean, so that has all the NBWs, and you can see them on the uprights. And if you notice, the underneath is not painted. Well, you know what? The underneath was never painted. They painted only the sides. I could not believe that. That's what it looked like when I took photos of it from underneath. And the truss rods run exactly the way the truss rods have to run, and they run all the way out to the end beams and match up with the end beam nuts and bolts that hold the truss rods in place. And then there are truss rods that you can barely see them, but there are truss rods that are the opposite of the corner trusses, of the angle trusses of wood. There are rod trusses that cause the X's, and you can see that on the underside you can see where those trusses come out through the side frames and are not and bolted on to that. So you can see there's one by the door. There's another holder for the truss underneath each of the vertical structures.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see that all of the brake gear is in place, including that the main beams are spliced, where they have metal plates that hold splice plates, they call those, and they're in place. So again, this was a car that I built just to see if I could build it exactly the way the prototype was built.
It had to be the thrill that you had to have, Charlie, when you finished that and sat back and looked at it and knew what you had accomplished. The thrill of being able to do that must be just overwhelming for you.
Well, yeah, I did. I submitted that. I submitted that to one of the contests too. It won first place there too. I was embarrassed because I think I won something like 4 plaques. But there are other people that I know that have won many plaques at the same show. So it happens.
Oh, absolutely. Particularly when you do work like that. Now, what is this showing?
I know. This looks like a simple little, simple little train depot. Well, every year, our organization builds a raffle layout. And we take this raffle layout. It's a 4x8 layout, and it's done in a couple of different segments. So you could have the raffle layout as a 4x8 or a 2x12. I mean, it's a really cute little layout. And we take that to, there's a show that's in Raleigh, North Carolina. And we build this raffle layout, then we raffle this layout off. And the proceeds from the raffle layout we use to buy brand new train sets for kids, and we give them to various organizations that supply those the kids with the layouts. I mean, not the layouts, with the train sets. So that's what we use with the proceeds of the raffle. But
Charlie, what's the name of your organization, Charlie?
That's no, it's not. It's our current organization. I'm part of the NMRA. And we belong to a region called the Mideastern region. And we are the division is called the Carolina Piedmont Division. So we're just part of the big national organization. That's where the MMR comes from. Wonderful organization. It happens to be an excellent division. We have some fantastic members. You'll meet some of them, okay? They are really excellent. This is an excellent social activity, excellent group of guys. And I'm thrilled to have become part of that organization. Well, the year in 2016, the young man who was running doing the raffle layout decided he wanted to model it after the town of Edenton, North Carolina. And in Edenton was a part of the old Norfolk Southern, the original Norfolk Southern ran from Norfolk, Virginia to Charlotte, North Carolina. Though that ran through the town of Edenton, and Edenton had a very large mill, and it was a mill town. They've restored some of the mill buildings and the mill houses and everything. And we wanted to kind of capture the look of Edenton, North Carolina. Well, I took on the task of building the Edenton station. And what I had from the Edenton station was there were no photographs. The only thing we had was a floor plan from 1910. On the internet, when you put Edenton Depot, in, you get a wooden depot, and that happened to have been the depot that was torn down, or no, it wasn't torn down, was moved and was replaced with this depot, which is a brick structure. And all I had was the footprint. Now we had to take that footprint and we had to compress it, because in HO, it would be almost, it would be half of a 4x8 layout. So I had to selectively compress it. And then I found a photo of a McKean car. I don't know if you've ever seen the McKean cars, those wind splitter cars. And the Norfolk Southern had one McKean car, and they had a picture of the McKean car when it was introduced. And it happened to have been right next to the station. And the only thing that you could see in the station was a little portion of the roof and a little portion of the brick siding. Well, I had to use that and kind of imagineer what that station would look like, because it's nothing now. Now it's just an L in an empty lot, and a concrete L of what the foundation was. So I came up with that building. And this is an interesting story, because the layout was a terrific layout. And it had the main mill building, it had little mill houses, it had the main church from Edenton, and then it had this station. And it was raffled. And somebody at the show won that raffle, got the layout, and was so shocked that he won the layout. He said, "I have no room for this. What are we going to do with that?" He says, "Well, why don't you donate it?" So we donated this layout in his name to the Chamber of Commerce in Edenton, North Carolina. And so that station, that layout, all those buildings are at the Chamber of Commerce, still there in Edenton. Nice story.
That is a nice story. And the Imagineering that you went through to create that station, that's part of the fun of model railroading, in my opinion. And it's part of the skill that you gather as a model railroader as you go along.
I think so. I think that, and that's the beauty of it. I mean, just love it.
Yeah, it's something that you won't see on a lot of other railroads. So, it's something unique that you created.
Yes.
Well, let's meet some of your friends. Try to get a little broader perspective about who Mr. Rausch is. First off, I want to introduce Jack Kellow. Jack, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you met Charlie?
Sure. Thank you, Jim. And hello, Charlie. Nice to see you.
How are you?
Internet. I grew up in Massachusetts, and I guess like every one of us on the screen, plus anybody in the hobby, they've always been fascinated with trains, from the get-go. I think I was about 8 or 9 years old when I received an American Flyer set. And my best friend, had a Lionel set about that same time. His cousin had a big Lionel set. About a year later, I was a little jealous because my younger brother received an HO set. And I really like the detail and the realism that you found in HO. And this is, way back in the early 60s even. And obviously, you can fit a lot more onto the ping pong table, which was our layout base back in those days. And I always enjoyed playing baseball growing up, and my cousin lived next to the railroad tracks. So we'd always stop doing what we were doing, baseball or tennis, and watch whenever there was a train going by. So it was always a big deal to us as kids and growing up. I moved to North Carolina with my wife in 2005 when she got tired of all the snow up north. And so I've been busy down here with several aspects of the model trains. I do a lot of volunteer work within the Mid-Eastern region and CPD. Carolina Piedmont Division. Plus, I do volunteer work for the Boston and Maine Historical Society. And whenever I go back north each summer, I do what I refer to as industrial archaeology. That is, I traipse around the old rail lines as much as I can, and just do a lot of photography and research into the old rail lines, but mostly into whatever structures I can come across. So I really enjoy the old buildings, railroad buildings, as much as any aspect of the hobby. And let's see, I've been volunteering and served as officers and at NMRA at the region and division levels. And presently I proofread for a number of the publications. Charlie was editor for a while on that. So, and now he's has me looking over his shoulder, reading some of the articles that he writes. He's a prolific writer, just like one of the other guests, John Sokash. So I get an opportunity to get an early view of all their writings. And I met Charlie, I guess it was sometime before the 2016 convention in Durham, North Carolina. Charlie had his layout open at that convention, and I was a co-chairman of that convention. So we got to know each other a bit before then, but especially in 2016, and really we've been good friends after that, since that time. And Charlie has been a prolific clinician and teacher and mentor to each of us, in addition to all of his writings. And so I've always enjoyed working with Charlie.
Well, Jack, that's a picture of your railroad, right?
That is, yes. I have the beginnings of my B&M themed railroad here down in North Carolina. I didn't watch the scroll, but early on in the photographs, you would have seen, some of the layouts shown. Vic Bitler, there you go. There's a shot there. In the background, I used to have just a green open space. Yeah. And our AP manager, Vic, suggested that it was too open. I needed something. So I just built a little park there, built a shed and some fencing. Yeah. I don't know if Chris Corser's on this call, but behind that back little pine tree is one of his little shed kits. And in the foreground is New England brownstone walls and my version of the Charles River. And if we can scroll a little bit, Dylan, there you go. That shows a double track main line that feeds all the way back into the North Station at the far end, with the Hotel Manga in the corner. And my layout is only about 20 inches deep, so you can see I use a lot of background flats to fit in the double track main line. That clam box is an interesting structure. I do a lot of craftsman kit building, and that clam box is an interesting structure. It was originally produced by Brian Bollinger, Bollinger Edgerly Scale Trains. Yep. And Jeff Adam now has that kit under his for his Motrac models. Yep. But the owners of that clam box restaurant were friends of our family, and my sister used to work in that little store. So I had to model that, put that on the layout. The Charles River scene that we scooted by, the actual B&M had 4 bascule bridges, each carried 2 tracks. And those are being replaced in the next year or so. There's only 2 remaining, but I had to get one of those models in. So I have 1 bascule bridge. That's all I could really fit. Yeah. And in the background, in that photograph, past the orange trailer that's on that roadway, there was a photograph of the Museum of Science in Boston. So if you see that, you'll recognize that photograph. And our mutual friend, Rob Russo, took a photograph of the Museum of Science while he was on a duck boat tour in the middle of Charles River. So that's a fun little thing that one of our friends contributed to the layout. There you go. There's the Museum of Science photograph in the back. Yep. And there's a variety of craftsman kits in the foreground, and I enjoy doing those structures and trying to super detail each of those. And here we go. There's some B&M motive power. And these are some of the structure photographs that are coming up. That is the Hotel Idaho that Bar Mills put out, and I built that, turned it into a nursing home. You can see the couple of folks with the in the wheelchair and some medical people. And, and that's Monster Model Works Robertson paper kit. I generally don't put signage identifying the kits until I'm ready to put them on a layout, because I have no idea what industry it's going to end up representing, or if it's even going to make it on the layout. Oh, yeah, that's Pete Garage. Yeah, that's one of Steve Millie's kits that I turned into Pete's Garage, that I named after a place where my mother used to get her car serviced in Ipswich. That is Chris Corse's Conowingo's small flat car. I turned that into a log car.
Mhm.
So if Chris is watching, he got a free promo right there. And I'm presently building 4 O-scale kits. I have 6 achievement certificates for the AP program of the NMRA. And I'm working on my 7th certificate right now, which is cars. So inspired by Martin Breckbield's presentations on new tracks and his writings, I thought I'd take a shot at building some O-scale cars. And with any luck, I'll have all these completed and judged, so I can try to sell them at Al Judy's show in June. And that's one of the structures I have on the layout, actually, that I've super detailed. And I named it Cabot Paints, Cabot Stains, actually. I passed that on Route 1 on the way into Boston virtually every day when I was driving. And there were no photographs of the actual building in existence. Even contacting Cabot, they had no old photographs of their own building. But I knew it was the frame building, and so there it is. I created that and just identified the locale by the signage. It's more of the same. That's the backside. This I found interesting. This is a train show find, and we were having a popular vote contest at one of our division meetings, and I didn't really have anything that was suitable for entry. So I picked this car up, I think, for about $1 or $2. So I took that out, finished it up, painted it, weathered it, and put some hay inside with a little farmer figure inside, and little droplets of brown clay are inside. And so I got this this figure. He's mucking out the stock car.
Love it.
And that's a little bit who I am, Jim.
Well, I tell you, that's very impressive, Jack. And thank you so much for joining us this evening. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Well, next I want to introduce another friend of Charlie's, John Sokesh. John?
Hey,
Well,
how you doing?
I'm doing well. Tell us a little bit about who you are and how you met Charlie.
Well, I grew up in northeastern Pennsylvania, part of anthracite coal country, Wilkes-Barre to be specific. And ever since I was out of diapers, I could remember seeing both the Delaware and Hudson and the Pennsylvania Railroad on the tracks just outside my mother's house. Officially, it was known as the Wilkes-Barre Connecting Railroad, which connected the D&H's Hudson Yard and the Pensie's Buttonwood yards. So I grew up with model railroads from the time I could remember. Unfortunately, I was born just as steam became a memory. And my only childhood memory of steam was seeing either a Pensie L1 Mikado or a M1 Mountain working a coal mine branch just off of Buttonwood Yards. That was it. But I've always had a love for steam. And there's one of my best friends there, 6'11". I've ridden behind 6'11" on a number of occasions. I've even gotten my son up into the cab on it on multiple occasions. It's just, if you ask me about trains, the era post World War II era, when we were transitioning from steam to diesel, that is what I completely love about steam. Just the last of it, the best of it. So I've been justifiably accused of having a model hobby shop in my basement here. I've been kit banging, putting stuff together for years. And I've known Charlie now for going on about 10 years. Charlie and I got inducted as a superintendent and then assistant superintendent about 7.5 years ago. And in January 22, the John and Charlie show became the Charlie and John show. I moved down to being assistant superintendent. Well, one of the things I never had a chance to do when I was growing up, and I'm very skilled when it comes to putting together like Bowser kits, their model train kits, like their die-cast Zamak and stuff. I never got into brass bashing. And then when Charlie showed me his bull moose, it got me turned on to the idea of not just collecting a few pieces in brass, but actually doing something with it. Now, the bull moose here, as Charlie explained with his, it's a Santa Fe 210-2 mechanism with a USRA heavy boiler on top. And I'm modeling it based upon what it would have looked like during and immediately after World War II. And I like detail, but I'm not a rivet counter. I mean, I'm of the philosophy that if it's darn close enough and it looks right, then it's okay to model it. Because I know a lot of people get hung up on stuff. And I'll tell you, as a railroad historian, which is also part of my life, the only time the engines ever looked identical was when they came out of the manufacturer, and given the numerous rebuildings that you had, none of them always stayed the same. So I'm looking specifically at modeling Bull Moose 210-2 number 360, because I found a photograph of it that actually, nope, stay there. A photograph of it that actually shows where the air pump filters. The usual practice was to have one on each side of the air pumps, and they're not duplex air pumps, they're single air pumps. They have both of them mounted on the side of the firebox and the piping run towards them. So, you know, that's the type of detail that really interests me. And like, again, I said, I'm not really a rivet counter. If it's close enough and it's, you know, within expectations or realizations, then I'm fine and I'm living with it. The tender, actually, Charlie's, is based upon a USRA model. That tender actually is a bit of a modified Boston and Maine, I'm sorry, correction, New Haven R3 tender, which closely resembles the type of tender that you would have found after the bull mooses got rid of their small ones and increased the capacity for coal and water. So some of the details that I did with that are the marker lights on the back end of the tender. There's also, if you look at the slope sheet for the coal, ahead of the toolbox, there's some vertical sheets that were used as stabilizers. So this again is another detail, and another detail is the rerailer frog that's hung from the frame. So this is what kind of turns me on. I love being able to work it, and I'm very much indebted to Charlie with this, simply because I would not have gotten into this without Charlie's help. I had zero experience doing anything with brass, other than if it was extremely crude and very simplistic. But since working with Charlie, I've gotten the resistance soldering kit. I've upgraded my soldering. I don't just have a soldering iron anymore. I have a good Weller soldering tool. And so, you know, this is all something I've indebted to Charlie over. Now, this is only the fourth bull moose that we know to be in existence. Matt Hauk with the O&W Historical Society has the first two. He's published a few articles on it. Charlie has number 3, and I will have, when it's finished, number 4. So this is something I'm very proud of. It's gotten me into the whole expectation of, well, if I've done this, there's other things I've been thinking about. because being an anthracite modeler, not every one of the anthracite roads was adequately modeled, especially when it came to their steam, which is one of the biggest things I love about it. I've seen, on many trips with the Norfolk Southern Historical Society excursions, this guy always had a bowler hat on that said coal smoke is good for you. So I'm kind of infected in that regard. So go to the next slide there. This is a kit. This is kind of my inspiration, but it's actually Charlie's work. It is a USRA heavy Mikado. And one of the things I asked Charlie to do, and this is prior to my even honing my skills on it, was to put that Worthington, that big BL Worthington feed water heater on the side of it, where you would find the air pump. Well, the air pump in that case, what the Erie Railroad did was to move it up to the engineer's side on the pilot deck. And that's not the original tender. This photo was taken with the idea of having a few people look at it and say, well, is that really a good one to use, or should it revert back to the USRA type long tenders? Well, in doing the research and stuff, I found out when the Erie Railroad needed to increase the capacity of the steam engines, coal was, they figured the locomotive carried enough coal for its entire day. Water, however, was a different problem. You didn't want to have to keep stopping every 60 miles or so for water. So it was vitally important to increase the size of the tender. And so in looking at some photographs, I realized what the Erie did in the late 30s and early 40s, when they had other locomotives like their S1 Berkshires being built, or even their 080 switchers being built. I mean, it sounds crazy, but they would have an 080 switcher built with that tender. And as a result, when it came in onto the Erie property, the tender got swapped from the 080 to the heavy reworked 2A2 Mikados. So in fact, if you start doing your research and stuff, you're going to find that things were never the same. And I'm indebted to a lot of the people on the internet who have published photographs and stuff, which contain, as you get to know all about the inners and outer parts of steam engines, you start to recognize stuff. It's more than just a steam engine. Got to look at it and say, well, what kind of feed water heater is that? What kind of valve gear? Are the drivers Bach poke, or are they spoked? And you get to start realizing, all of these things were critters. Don't forget, I mean, it sounds crazy, but steam engines were very much treated as women. Engineers had their favorites, and every one of them, an engineer would tell you, was different. So this again is the type of things that I got interested in, and that Charlie has been helping me hone my skills. I'm very much indebted to him as a mentor in being able to do stuff. And that scene you see there, that jumbled mess of all kinds of stuff sitting in the background, yeah, that's my layout at the moment, because I'm finally, now I've retired from IT for the Division of Public Health, and I'm getting really time to start working on it in earnest. So I think you can maybe one more slide for me, or was that it?
No.
Okay, so this is another inspiration that I had that Charlie worked on for me. This is a Western Maryland 210. Well, it's the Lehigh and New England. Charlie, correct me if that's correct. It's not Lehigh and Hudson. Yeah, the Lehigh and New England Railroad had some 210s. They were virtually identical to the Western Maryland. And, Charlie made some modifications. You could see the injector pipe is a little bit different there below the running board and the sand dome. They stripped away the air bazookas, as they call them, in the firebox. And Charlie mounted the twin air pumps up front and changed the pilot to better represent the prototype. All of this went hand in hand with my, getting the bug to start actually putting these things together. And if you look closely on the tender, it's a USRA stock type of tender, but the rear truck is a Bethlehem Works tender booster. And there's actually a small smokestack for an exhaust stack for that tender booster on the back deck of the tender. And that was, if historically, if you know that, you've ever heard of the name L.F. Laurie. And I lived next to some of their, I think it was a great nephew. Lenore F. Laurie was the president, longtime president of the Delaware and Hudson. And he also had a lot of time as a chief executive of the Baltimore and Ohio before he had a falling out with them, at which time he went to the D&H. But this is the type of things that I've worked with Charlie, and I'm now picking up on doing the brass bashing, much thanks to Charlie's mentorship and tutelage. I think there might be one more photograph I have of that engine the other side. All right, again, there you could see some of the changes that we made to bring the engine more in line with the prototype. And you have a better view there of the tender stack and of that Bethlehem tender booster. Charlie and I have gone to Timonium, Maryland, the train show on a number of occasions. And he has stuff to sell and I go scavenging, looking for stuff and looking for parts especially, since a lot of this stuff has gotten hard to find. I love the brass. I love what you can do with it. And this is all part of the fun of model railroading and the hobby that just I find so fascinating. All right, so that's pretty much where I come from, and my thanks to Charlie.
Well, you're lucky to have Charlie as a mentor, John, and thank you so much for sharing the information with us.
Charlie, thank you, and public acclamation for everything that you've done to bring to the hobby.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Well, now let's meet Bill Davis. Bill, welcome. And why don't you join us and tell us a little bit about yourself and how you met Charlie?
Hi, Jim. Well, it's all my mother's fault. I was 3 years old, and for Christmas, she gave me an American Flyer circus train set. And she says that I crawled around the floor as I went around the circle, and I was never the same again. And so there's a picture of me at Spencer. I've been in this hobby, like I said, since I was a kid. I started off with American Flyer, dabbled in HO, but in the 60s, I had the opportunity. I was stationed in the Air Force just outside of San Francisco, and I was able to go to Oakland. And at Oakland, I ran into Russ Simpson's hobby shop, and there I met some of the premier fine scale modelers of the day, people like Bob Brown, who does the Gazette, and his cronies and stuff like this, Gordon Cannon, who was Cannon and Company and stuff. And I was just amazed at their model work. And I realized that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a fine scale modeler. And so even though at that time I was like in the military, and then after that there was girls in college, and I eventually got married, and I went back into the hobby again, and I'll never forget I bought a DNRGW high side gondola kit, and I started building this kit. And my wife, I showed it to my wife, and she didn't know why there was a steering wheel on the end. And I thought, oh, great. And her mom thought I was, what's he playing with trains for and stuff like this. But then I had an opportunity to start doing custom model building. Well, now it went from, okay, this long-haired crazy guy that's married my daughter, now it makes money doing this stuff. And so she kind of took a liking to what I was doing and stuff. But anyway, I eventually started to get involved with some of the magazines and stuff, and I started writing articles. And today I have a column in O-scale trains and fairly regular contributor to O-scale trains and stuff. So next slide. So this little flat car here, this is not my model. This is one of Charlie's models. I was really impressed with this. We went to the 2016 regional NMRA convention in Durham, and this was in competition on the freight car part. And I just liked the little, it's just a cute little, cool little car that I just was very appealing to me. And so I have this picture of it and stuff. Next slide. Well, in this contest, Charlie and I went head to head. The caboose on the left is Charlie's caboose. The caboose on the right is my caboose. Charlie took second place. I got first place, but it doesn't matter because these are both exceptional models. I mean, Charlie has full interior detail in his. I have full interior detail in mine. Charlie's just an excellent model builder, and I'm proud to have been able to go up against him. Now, there is times, quite a few times, a matter of fact, when I was part of the NMRA and CPD 13. Unfortunately, my schedule has changed where I can't attend the meetings, but Charlie, I went up head to head there too, except I usually lost. But anyway, so next slide. So I love critters. I have a collection of these. I have like 10 of them I've built now and stuff like this. I absolutely love these little guys. And this is the most recent one I have built. And these guys have talked a lot about brass. That's only one of 2 brass I have. I also have a 16-ton shade that I've been building for the last, well, I don't know, 40 years or so. It's good. I'm going to get the run this year, I think. This year is going to happen. I might have to go to Charlie's house to have it final out there, but I'm going to get it running this year. But anyway, that's a brass CarWorks engine. I did some modification to it. The bell, the lights, the horn, the steps on the side of the cab. I took the cab door out. There's some other modification on the other side that you don't see. The air hoses was added and things. It's just a thing. And I really love weathering. And so one of my favorite railroads is quarry railroads. And so this is lettered from my quarry railroad called Cornerstone Rock. And that's why it's so sort of dusty and dirty looking like it is. So next slide. This is my most recent model. Martin Breckbill built this car on New Tracks Meetup, and I liked his model, so I asked him for the set of plans, and he sent me the plans for it from the kit that he built. And actually, this is he built the Russ Simpson kit. This is scratch built based on those plans. I mean, if I just finished it about a week before we did this. I love detail, and this car has every detail conceivable on it. So I love detail. I love weathering. I love scratch building and kit bashing. I have a tendency not to build anything the way it's designed, unless it's an absolute hardcore prototype. I mean, it's fair game, otherwise and stuff. So next picture. So I work for a self-storage company, and part of my job is to maintain the property. And so I was out picking up trash around the property as part of my job, and I found a piece of PVC pipe that was 5 inches long and 1.5 inches in diameter, which would be 6 feet in diameter by 20 feet long. And I went, this is a tank car body. So I brought it home and scratch built everything else to go with it, and it became a tank car, a logging tank car. Now this Charlie and I have done some traveling together quite a bit, actually. We've been to see 611 and the other North Fork engines up at Roanoke. We've been to a train show up in Roanoke and another occasion. So this is Charlie in the cab of 611. I've had great times with him. We've traveled up to Virginia there's a group called the Virginia and Carolina Modeler Society, and they used to have, before COVID, an annual get together in some place in Virginia. And Charlie and I've been to a couple of those together, and I've just had a great time with Charlie. I love being around him, and I love traveling with him, and sharing the hobby with him and stuff, because he's just very enthusiastic. I'm very enthusiastic about it. So it's a good combination and stuff. Next picture. Okay. I don't have a layout. I'm just a model builder. Operating trains does not excite me. However, I love going to Charlie's layout and running his logging branch. And I think we have a video of it being run. No, this is
That's the sawmill.
That's the sawmill complex. Yeah, that's the
Yes,
sawmill
it's the sawmill
complex.
complex, right.
Yeah, on the layout and stuff. And the Longmere camp is on one end of the layout, and you have to work your way down to the main line, and then you have to get down the main line to where the sawmill is. But the problem is that the main line is also occupied by the main railroad. So you got to make sure your little shay and stuff that's chugging along there is not getting in the way of the other trains running. It's really kind of fun. And I have to admit that hanging out with Charlie and running his railroad with him and stuff like this has really given me an appreciation for operating trains and things. Now I think we have the video. Or don't.
Or don't.
Wait, here it is. So this is the logging branch being operated. Actually, this is by the sawmill. This is coming into the sawmill area.
That's a live load too. There always were live loads of the logs.
Yeah. And when you get down to you get down to the yard, it's the other end here, which we won't probably come into this video here, but you have to do some switching and bring those cars up to the sawmill and then unload them into the mill pond. And then you have to go back and get some more, just like the railroaders did.
Yeah, there are 2 trains a day. There's 2 trains a day, one load, one live, and they meet on the main line at a passing siding.
Right.
And you can't get in the way. You got to ask the dispatcher if for permission to get onto the main line. And the dispatcher will say, "Okay, guys, there's a local coming, and you're going to have to sit there for a half an hour." And so that happens. But it's a railroad kind of thing, you know.
Yep, it is, and like I said, that aspect of running trains was something I never considered about, you know.
Well, I've gotten pretty heavily involved in operations, and I really kind of like it. And I'm starting to do operations with JMRI, where the computer is doing random manifests, where it randomly picks cars and puts them into certain industries, and picking up cars from certain industries and then sending them out to interchange. And I've really been fascinated by this and how that works on a computer level. And I always wanted to do this because I said, I know these little PCs can do something. And finally, somebody, you know, it took 20 years, but we've got a good working JMRI system that really does this operation stuff. And it's operation to me is another aspect of the hobby that is really excellent.
Yeah, I have to agree that about that and stuff. So now that COVID is basically over, I'm more willing to travel now and stuff like this. And so I'm looking forward to cutting up to Charlie's again on a Wednesday or whenever he wants to have an operating time and run some trains.
Yes, sir.
That logging branch needs to be run.
Yeah, and then we have to build that critter, the one that I had the etchings for.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, Charlie, I can build with wood, I can build with plastic, I can build with cardboard, I can build with whatever you want to build, except brass. and so Charlie laid some etchings on me for a GE 25-tonner critter, and so that's going to be my indoctrination to actually building brass. My 16-ton shay, 90% of it has been built by other people. I wrote this friend or that friend. I'll build you this if you build work on that. And so by trading and swapping.
Building a brass shay is somewhat intimidating, having built the Chemtron shay. So
yeah, well this was an iron horse.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Maybe the parts will fit better.
A little bit, yes. But like I said, I didn't build the major parts of it, so you know I've just done some detail work on it. So
iron horse, that puts it around not 1987, 88.
No, actually, there's a story about that. I actually got a hold of a Chemtron shay, and I looked at the box of parts and was totally intimidated by it. And so there was a little hobby shop in my area there, and there was a guy that had a West Side, an HON3 West Side 15.
Mhm.
And so he said, I'll trade you. So, okay, so I traded him. So now I have an HON3 West Side 15, except I am a dyed in wool O-scale modeler, right? I've done HO as far as custom building goes, but for myself personally, I don't have any HO here. So anyway, I had the opportunity in that hobby shop. A guy had ordered a 16-ton Shea kit and decided he didn't want it. And so the hobby shop guy says, well, I know a guy that wants that 15. So I traded the hobby shop for the 15 for the Iron Horse kit. So now I have an Iron Horse kit. So open that up, another box of parts.
Oh.
But I was able to rope, like I said, rope a couple of my friends to do the major work on it. So,
Yeah.
but anyway,
That's a good. They're a little intimidating. The Chemtron is intimidating because you really had to work the parts to get.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
You know, when I went to that meeting in Russ Simpson's place, I met Gordon Cannon, and Gordon Cannon was an incredible model builder and especially brass builder. He totally scratch built a 2-truck Climax and a 3-truck Shea. And I looked at those things and I said to him, I would really like to build one of those one of these. And he says, you ever built anything in brass? And I said, no. He says, start with an 040. And I thought, no, that's kind of arrogant. Until I started messing around with some of that stuff and went, oh, now I got it.
Yes.
Well, Bill, thanks so very much. Good to talk to you. We've got
Okay.
I'm afraid we got to move on. We got a lot more.
That's fine. That's fine.
Guys. Charlie, let me change the subject here a little bit.
Okay.
We've seen some of your modeling. We've heard some of your friends talk about how skilled you are and everything. So I know at some point in your career, people came to you and said, build this for me, do that for me, so forth and so on. What did you find different when you're building for somebody else than when you're building for yourself?
Well, when you build for somebody else, you're on a deadline, because even though the fellow says, take as long as you want to get it done, you don't have that. That's a commodity you don't have.
Right.
You can't count on. So you have to finish the model. And that's really the critical aspect of it, because there are times when you're building for yourself, you can put the model on a shelf and say, I don't know how I really want to handle this, so let me think about this. We can't do that when we're doing something for someone else. So that's an aspect, and then you have to look at it and find out how critical the fellow for whom you are building is. How critical is he about things? Does he want to have every rivet to be exactly in that spot, and this row of rivets has to have 12 rivets and not 11 or not 14? Or is he going to be a rivet counter, or is he not going to be a rivet counter? I mean, this sand dome is doesn't quite match this particular casting doesn't quite match what the prototype is. So, I mean, do we spend 10 hours making a dome, or do we take this casting and solder the casting on?
Yeah.
Okay. And save the 10 hours of that. So that's right. The aspect of it. You have to really kind of work with your customer.
And I have to
call it a client,
What would you say to a modeler who's thinking about building, custom building? What are the pros and cons that you would point out?
Well, the real thing in if you're doing any work for anybody is that you have to take into consideration, well, first of all, you have to be able to handle criticism, okay? Because, I mean, there are some people who are going to find something that they want to have it a certain way, and that may not be attainable, and you have to learn to be flexible, right? You also have to learn, you may not be interested in this particular model, so you've got to put the time and effort in to make it perfect. So those are aspects of it. I mean, I do it to support my hobby, okay, to support my own hobby. And so,
right.
I right now my shelves are kind of full with a lot of people's work, and you have to be able to sacrifice the time that you want to spend building to use the time to build it for somebody else.
No,
You know,
I
I heard you use that word over and over again in your discussion, that word time. Time seems to be the main consideration for you.
Well, it's one of those things that we have little of. Okay, and there are things that you know are there are things that get in the way of time. I mean, and there are things that we want to do in addition to our hobby. I mean, we have a family and friends, and you know, and all those other aspects. But and our hobby has all those aspects. I mean, I love to go to operating sessions. So I mean, I am spending, you know, I'm going to an operating session on Saturday afternoon. I mean, that's a 5-hour deal.
Yeah.
Same as if you want to go out and play golf. That's a 5-hour deal too. You know,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
you have to balance the time. And
one more
we
thing
have
in
to
there
balance the
too.
time so that we do things in a very social manner, in a very controlled manner, and to balance life, because life is a balance. We can't just concentrate, do our only thing, just do this, and just concentrate on one thing. We have to bring other things into our lives. This hobby helps, though. It does really help.
One more just real quick thing here. When you were talking about the custom model building, I have a history in custom model building as well. And one of the other things you have to realize is you cannot consider how much time it's taking you to build that model. Because if you start adding up how much time it took you compared to what you made for building it, you'd be very frustrated for what it turned out to be.
Yeah,
so
10
time
cents
is
an hour.
really a factor in all of this.
Yes,
you know?
of course. It's 10 cents an hour many times.
If very much so.
Yeah,
Very much so.
exactly. But you know, I look at that, Bill, is because if I'm going to, let's say I'm going to build, let's say the Lehigh New England 210 modification that I did for John. I can't tell you how much time it's spent for me to line up how to get those 2 air pumps, the 2 little single air pumps on the pilot deck straight, so that, and then run the lines in there. I mean,
Right.
It might have taken me 5 or 6 hours to do that. I can't
Exactly.
charge John $100 just for that.
Right, exactly. And that's the same thing I discovered in custom model building. But just like you, I spent years doing custom model building because that's how I supported the hobby.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know,
it is.
you just bite the bullet and say, okay, well, I made $100 for doing this model, so that's $100 in my pocket for model building.
That's
buying
right.
my own model stuff.
Yeah.
So that's what I would tell that to the person who's looking to want to do model building, is to realize that you're not going to make a lot of money at it, but you will be able to support the hobby.
Yeah. Well, you know, but you have to plan your jobs. I mean, somebody wants me to take apart and install DCC into a B&O Challenger Imports EM1. I don't want to take that thing apart. I don't want to take it apart. I don't want to take it apart, put the decoder in, solder all the wires, and put it back together again, because it's too big, too complicated, and I can't charge them enough to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to kind of pick your poisons when it comes to those things.
I think you're right. You're exactly right.
If I could add something on that regard, and I learned this with building the bull moose with Charlie. You know, I came into this, you know, with minimal brass bashing skills. Charlie's been my mentor with it. But when you stop and think about it, you know, it's not like the same as putting a Bowser I1 kit together where you're just drilling holes and using epoxy or ACC to put the things together. You're talking about heating up brass to 700 degrees Fahrenheit. You know, you can't exactly plan on grabbing the thing to hold it there while it cools down. It just ain't going to happen. So you've got to you know, it's not just buying the resistance solder. It's not just buying the Weller soldering tool. You also have to invest in a lot of time in other tools like clamps, vices, and so on, that you can hold the thing together while you are doing, you know, the soldering. And even with that, you might want to get it lined up. And at that last second, right as you're letting it cool, it moves, and you look at it and think, ain't gonna work. And it becomes a learning experience when a lot of times you're trying something new. 90% of the time is going to be wasted because you're learning how to do it to begin with.
That is exactly true, because you have to you start your experience. You're making your experience out of all of those little modifications to the temperature. And at what time you're doing an air pump aligned to an air pump, and you're heating that air pump, and that you're bringing that line in, and you can see when that solder melts and when it holds and how to hold it in place. And you know what the temp, and you set the temperature on your resistant soldering device, or using it on the soldering iron. There are times when we do soldering, right? I say, well, make that 65%. No, make that 90%, because you got to heat up a little bit more meat than you got to heat up when you're doing this kind of a line. And if you use too much heat, you're just going to burn and melt the little wire that's coming in. So it's a lot of experience in just doing all this stuff constantly.
And the other issue with all that too is you've got to be careful how you're doing it all, because you might get that area heated up enough and have 4 parts fall off.
Oh yeah, we know
Exactly. Been there, done that.
Yeah,
that's
why they have different temperature solders, and
Oh,
then
yeah,
you
I
have
know
to
that.
decide which solder you want to use.
Exactly. Yeah, there's
John,
different-
what kind of resistance outfit do you have?
It's an American Beauty 250 watt, and it's with the tweezers.
Let me tell you a funny story. I'll take a minute here, Charlie, if you don't mind. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, I learned how to build in brass. I was taught by a guy that worked for General Motors in their model making department. And I used to go over to his house every Saturday and sit down, and we'd eat donuts, drink coffee, and I'd watch him build in brass, and he taught me how to do it. Greatest education I could have ever gotten. The late 80s, 90 came along, and all I knew how to use was a soldering iron. And it, you plugged it in the wall, and it got hot, and it just stayed hot, and when you were through soldering, at the end of the day, you unplugged it, and it eventually cooled off. That was a soldering iron that I've been using. So I heard about resistance soldering, and American Beauty headquarters was downtown Detroit, Michigan. And I lived in a suburb, so I figured, well, let me just call them up and find out about it. So I did, and they invited me down, and I went down, and I called a friend of mine who was a photographer for GM, and he joined me. And I took some of my brass models with me, and I went down there, and I showed them what I did, and told them the kind of soldering equipment I had. And they started bringing out all of these different things that they made for American Beauty. And so we took photographs, and I was down there probably an hour and a half, and I ended up writing an article for the magazine. At that time, it was called 48-Foot O-Scale News. It was all about, and I used to write the column for them called Singing Wire, because I'm a trolley model. So I wrote the article, and they heard about it, and they called me up and they said, Jim, we have a corporate policy. We don't give anybody one of our outfits. But he said, what we've decided to do in your case is we're going to loan this to you, and we'll call you up and tell you when we want it back. And you got a deal. I said, I'll be down this afternoon. And so I went down and picked up one of everything that they had out, showed me that day. And that I still have it and use it to this day. And that was my introduction to resistance soldering. I never will forget those people. Anyway,
a nice story.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah. Anyway, Charlie, so your modeling techniques and so forth that you've shown in the various magazine articles that you've done clinics on, that you helped other people with. You want to share some of those stories with us?
Okay. Well, one of the I read early on. Once I guess when I started reading all the magazines, Bill Shop is the guy who's I was fascinated by, because Bill Shop had all those articles on kit bashing and brass bashing things, and they didn't call it brass bashing at the time. And I don't know when I heard that you first used that term, I just find that to be a fascinating part of the hobby. I have two friends in New Jersey, John Hutnick and a fellow named the late Joe Borick. Joe Borick was a phenomenal model builder. He could build in brass, and he could fine tune a locomotive. And he was responsible for many of the locomotives that were done for the Allegheny Midland. And when the Allegheny Midland was all diesel, Joe took one of his C&O 2662s onto that to the railroad. He ran the railroad, and the fella said, "Holy Christmas! I have a whole bunch of steam engines I could give you. If you can make them run like this, I'm going back from diesel to steam." And he did. He did. He moved them. He moved the Allegheny Midland over to steam, and that was Joe Borick. And Joe Borick was the fellow that helped me. That we worked side by side with on building the O&WP class, and back in '95, I decided one of the things that Joe Borick did is he made one of the O&W 060 switchers, and I said that I always wanted to do that switcher, so I found the parts for it. I found a frame. I found drivers. I was able to pick up the cab and boiler front from their little 260s, and I bashed all that stuff together, and I put all that together, and I actually took photos of it, and I did plans on it, and I said, you know what? Let me make an article up. So I wrote an article up, and I sent it to Mainline Modeler. I don't know if you remember Mainline Modeler. It was printed between 1980 and 2004, I believe. And they really were responsible for really having very detailed mainline locomotives, car details, and they loved those kinds of articles. And as opposed to Model Railroader and Craftsman, which did little layout tours, and they did a lot of stuff on layout tours and items that you can buy from the hobby shop. Mainline spent a lot of time early on with actually building models. And so Mainline actually did that article, I think it was in 1995. So it was that issue that I did an article for them also on modifying a Sunset Pennsy I-1 decapod, but I'm talking about the O-scale one. I don't know if you remember, but U.S. Hobbies had built O-scale Pennsy decapods. However, the boiler was wrong on the U.S. Hobbies, because it was a KTM Katsumi built those. And Katsumi made mistakes they'd made a lot of compromises when they were building the shape of the boilers on the K4 and on the Pennsy I-1 decapod in their brass models. Made great mechanisms, made great things, but these things were wrong. And in 1991, 92, Sunset came out with their Prestige series and made an O-scale Pennsy decapod. And when you looked at it and you started taking the measurements, found out that the boiler shape was perfect. And the mechanism was a very substantial mechanism. They just copied the Katsumi mechanism. So I took this Pennsy boiler and redetailed it and really upgraded the details. And I wrote an article for it, and then that got printed in Mainline Modeler. So that got me started in doing a couple of articles here and there, and it just started the whole prospect of building and trying to show what you've done and how you do it.
I think it's great, and you know, it's the articles that got a lot of us started. Let's face it, you know, because there wasn't the internet way back when for a lot of us, and without the magazines and without the people that wrote the articles, we never would have learned. We never would have thought about doing some of the things that we saw. So thank you so much for your help in that regard, Charlie. Well, listen, we talked about some of your models, but let's see some more of them.
Okay. Well, you gotta have to show me some photos.
Well, we'll show you some photos, and then you can
We'll
talk
talk about them. Wow, there's an early one.
There you go.
There we go. This is an Android kit. One of the 1 in 5,000 Android kits. Very early on, I must have built that in the early 70s.
Boy, weren't they outstanding though at the time?
Well, I have a story about that. Okay. My next door neighbor came to me about 6-7 years ago and said, my grandkids are been talking about getting a train set for Christmas. He said, you have such nice trains. Do you want to? And I have trains when I was a kid. So would you help me build a layout? So I said to Kevin, fine, let's go build a little 4x8 layout and so for the grandkids, and we'll do this. And so we built the layout, and we got his old trains running, and he got some new trains on eBay. And one day I had a door-and-a-half boxcar by Ambroid. I mean, I think it was number one of the first of the 1 in 5,000 kits. It was an extra kit I had in a box. And I said, Kevin, take a look at this kit. You might enjoy building this. Well, let me tell you, does he enjoy building these? He has built all of the kits. All right. Well, not all of them. I think he's built. He had to build at least 20 or 30 of them. Okay. Yeah. He joined the NMRA. He is now he's master building these craftsman kits. Yeah. Actually, he came to the convention. He's on our board of directors now. He comes to meetings. And he's a phenomenal modeler. He is the master car builder of our group. And he took best in show for a scratch built car that's somewhat similar to this.
Unbelievable.
Best in show last year. I mean,
that's a great story.
It is great, and Kevin is a terrific guy, and he's right next door. I mean, I just the decoder I was telling you I put in today with his new nickel plate diesel. So I had him in here and we were talking about it, and I got the decoder in. But so this Ambroid kit reminds me of that because he at first he called me, how do you do this and how do you do this? What about the paint? How about getting an airbrush? Because he was brush painting the stuff, and then he get an airbrush. And now, how do you? What is all these details underneath here with all the brakes and all the levers? And we went through that and explained it all. So he's got them all in there now. So he's taken the Ambroid kits, but he's enhanced them, and he's enhanced them with better wire. He doesn't use the big thick wire of the that came with the kit. We put better trucks on and better ladders. So it's one of those things. So this is this Ambroid kit. As a matter of fact, he built that car. He built this car just recently, and it won our popular vote contest a month ago because we had your newest addition to your freight car list was our popular vote, and his and I got to tell you, his car is better than mine. Let me tell you, but. That's how it is. Good. That's Kevin.
Okay. All right. Let's see another one.
All right. Here we go. See, it's not only cars and locomotives. I like structures too. Now this is a whole series of DPM modular walls.
Yeah.
And I kind of like working with the DPM modular walls. I said in this corner of the layout, I needed some big building. And I like the idea. My friend Ed Regan likes beer. My son-in-law, Kevin Barkin, likes beer. So I said, why don't we have a beer craft brewing company? We'll call it the Regan Barkin Brewery. And the beer is called Rebars. Extra strong beer. Okay. And so I looked at this and I said, I can use that. I said, one of the things I want to have, okay, I'm in Colorado, so I'd like to have protective unloading and loading. So I built that specifically so that I can have protected, weather protected loading and unloading. And it's just scratch built, scratch design, fits the corner that I'm looking to model. And
Yeah.
it has some interior and some lighting. I have some stainless steel tanks in there, and not a lot. There's no office or with office furniture, but there's stuff that you can see in the lit areas.
Okay. Next.
Well, I modeled the Rio Grande Southern, and how can you have the Rio Grande Southern without the Como Roundhouse, right?
Yeah.
Well, the Como Roundhouse was on the Colorado and Southern in Como, but that happens to be the Como Roundhouse, and it's I have that on the layout, and that's a very highly weathered, detailed Balboa C21 280, and I've weathered that beyond belief. So
Absolutely beautiful. Next.
yeah, go ahead. Another one. Okay, again. This is a pure styrene structure. It's done with I think ABS, not ABS, evergreen styrene. Again, it's a corner. It's at the end of my what I call the coal branch, and I needed a coal mine, and I needed that to fit a corner. I mean, it has a definite space. So you kind of imagineer how you would have a coal mine in that kind of space. So.
What it's all about. That is beautiful modeling, no question.
It's Imagineering. That's really basically what it is.
It is, and it's part of Modeling Railroad, and something that you ought to really be proud of, because that's just beautiful.
Yes, thank you.
Next.
Oh, no. This one. Now this is a kit. This one I built for Charlie White back in the late 1980s. This was a San Juan model kit. This is, I mean, literally, when you open this box up, it's a box of sticks. The later version of this Durango coaling tower, it has laser cut walls and stuff. This was not laser cut. Every board and everything was a board by board situation. I mean, and the boards are interlaced. And you can see some of the interlacing on the edges, on the edge timbers. So it's a very, very complex kit.
Charlie, let's face it, back in the 80s, a lot of the kits were bunches of sticks. Let's face it.
Well, see, in the 1980s, there was no ON3. I mean, ON3, yes, Gordon Cannon started ON3 using HO mechanisms, but that wasn't very prevalent. It wasn't until Bachmann came out with the Christmas Village, the 260 in using HO track on O scale model, on O scale engine size, which would
Bachmann created ON30. There's no question about it.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yes, and it's huge. It's bigger than ON3 by far.
I think it's probably the largest narrow gauge scale out there today.
Yeah, well, because they're using it not only for the modeling the 36-inch gauge, but they're modeling the 2-foot gauge. Because Lou Sassy's layout models 2-foot gauge main, but that's still using ON30 track.
Exactly.
Yes. Another magnificent railroad, if you noticed.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Now I have two turntables because I have two towns, the two major division points, and these are HO Bowser 18-inch turntables. Okay, and very crude, simple turntables, and they work very well for me. I mean, they don't index. I don't index them. I mean, this is like it's like the real railroad. You got to line them up.
Next.
Yeah, you saw that shot before. That's the that's the industrial spur. There are 3 industries on that particular spur, and I love doing the switching because you sometimes have to pick things up at the far industry and not move the cars that are in the front, or get permission from the guys who are running the factories there, the two other industries, to say, hey, listen, I got to get that car out. Can we move your car? So So that's part of the process. So this is an overall shot of the Durango yard, and you can see the Lionel, the ex-Lionel Rico station that I have cut up, and that's sitting there as a standalone station without the freight house attached.
What you're talking about is some of the real fun of operating as a real railroad would.
Oh yeah, we do. That's what I do. I truly. Hey, listen. I said there's so many aspects of this hobby that I like.
Yeah.
Other than ballasting track.
Yeah, and cleaning the track. Don't forget that.
Oh, but that's the part I didn't like. I don't mind the ballasting. It's the cleaning afterwards and getting the switches to work again.
Next picture.
Oh, freight house. There's a good story, this freight house, because in my HO days, I loved building the wonderful kits by George Celios, the fine scale miniature kits.
Yep.
And I must have built a dozen or so of the fine scale miniature kits. And I've kept a couple of the HO ones. Some of the HO ones are now gracing my grandson's layout. But this one, I always liked their freight house. And so I actually said, oh, I need a freight house here in this particular spot. I said, you know what? If I could just take that HO freight house and blow it up into O scale, that would be perfect. Maybe shorten it a little bit. And so that's what I did. I built a freight house, and it's basically designed by the fine scale miniature freight house, one of their freight houses, and with all the the accompanying detail. It has interior and exterior, full interior detail.
Unbelievable, beautiful.
And individual shingles, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Next.
Everybody has a hobo camp, right?
Yeah.
So some hobo is playing. I guess it's a banjo. A hobo's playing a banjo, and there's a guy who doesn't look to be very friendly, bringing wood.
The fire looks comfortable too.
And while the fire's comfortable, that's a little. I think I bought one of the what's the miniatures? What's the name of that company? That has that has a little electronic projects, and that's one of those electronic projects that I put in with the flickering. It has it's LEDs, 3 or 4 LEDs.
Charlie, I think that was Fine Scale Miniatures had that.
No, what Fine Scale Miniatures is it's Miniatronics. That's the name of the company.
Okay. Yeah.
Miniatronics. That's it. We're close.
Next.
Oh, that's at Ameritown. Those 3-rail buildings that are very simplistic 3-rail buildings that I kit bashed 3 of them together and made this. This is the I call this Holtzman's millwork. Holtzman was the woodman. That's what it is if you translate to German, Holtzmann. And he's the millwork. He's a very big recipient of the raw lumber coming out of the sawmill that's in 3 towns away. So he gets those boxcars from the sawmill that has the rough lumber, and then he gets empty boxcars to take out his doors and his cabinets and his windows to ship someplace else. So that's Holtzman's. Again, it's a kit based structure. I always buy, even if I buy a structure kit or if I look at a structure, what's its name? One of the Tom York structures. I look at it and I say, well, that's a nice structure. I just don't want to have it this way. I think I want to have it that way. So I take the perfect example is the Silver Plume Bakery. Do you know of that? Silver Plume Bakery. Silver Plume is a little town in the end of the Clear Creek line for the Colorado and Southern narrow gauge, and the Silver Plume is basically a cutesy town, right? They kept all the old structures. Well, there's a bakery in Silver Plume. It's the Silver Plume Bakery, and somebody came out with a kit for the Silver Plume Bakery. I didn't make it a bakery. I made it Nancy's New York Emporium. After my daughter, it has got all sorts of dresses and fancy stuff inside there. And only photos that you can, when you look through the windows, you can see photos, but it looks like there's a lot of dresses and there's ladies buying things, at the counter. And it has a cash register.
All right, so next.
Oh yeah, this is the Chemtron Shea that we talked about before, and that's sitting on the that's sitting on the log dump. Okay, it's just going to go run around. It brought the log cars, the log train in. It's now going to run around the log train and now push the log cars onto the log dump, and then we dump the logs into the pond. So
that's great. That's great looking. That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, that's unfortunately it doesn't show much of the engine's mechanism, because I didn't have the light set up right properly for the exposure, because I'm picking up outdoor light, because the layout room has an exit outside. So I'm not in a basement that I have the one wall is all windows.
Yeah.
So I have too much daylight is in that photo, unfortunately. But incidentally, that whole log mill complex.
Yeah.
Do you remember the Danby sawmill by Keystone?
No, I don't remember.
Keystone was a company in Pennsylvania that made an HO little tiny sawmill. It was called the Danby sawmill, and it also made it in O scale. And it was all of about 10 inches long. It had the whole log carriage, it had a ramp, and it had the boiler and all that other stuff. And it was just a straight cut saw, and that was not a bandsaw.
Yeah.
Well, I built this entire sawmill complex around the Danby sawmill. And you can see just the start of the Danby sawmill, where the guy is waving his hand up, because he's telling the guy at the bottom, send up another log. So that's the old Danby sawmill.
Unbelievable. Next photo.
Oh, okay. As part of getting an MMR, you need to have instructors. You need to have a bridge. So I decided to build a bridge. It's my logging camp bridge. It happens to be a bridge number 51 on the Rio Grande Southern. And I had the plans in the Rio Grande storybook on Bridge 51. And I actually cut all the lumber that wasn't just 12 by 12s. All the other odd shaped lumber was cut on my Dremel table saw.
Yeah.
To match. And once you set up a fence, and you can just cut the various shapes and sizes, and you do that, and it has all of the nut and bolt castings and all that. And so because it had to get merit points in order to be part of the structures.
What kind of radius did you put in that, John?
And so you're looking at the approach to the bridge is at 24. The bridge itself is much larger than 24. That looks like about 36.
36, okay.
Yeah, but I mean, that didn't measure it. It needed to fit a space.
Yeah.
And so it was engineered the way they really engineered it. I had to go from where the nose of the shade to that abutment. And so however you go there, you had a stream there. And so you had to figure out how you were going to cross the stream, and the way you had to cross the street. So if you look, there is different kinds of structures above the street and above the stream bed.
Yeah, to me, it's hard for me to tell from the start over here where you see the engine to the end on the other end. Is that uphill?
Yeah, it's uphill by an inch difference.
Oh, okay.
Inch difference. Yeah, and what happens is that all of the second tier, all the second tiers are all the same size.
Gotcha.
It's the first tier where it changes height.
Yeah.
And it's about 7 feet.
Unbelievable. Beautiful. Just beautiful workmanship. Next.
Oh, yeah, you can see how you cross the stream. You see and that's prototypical.
Yep.
That's prototypical.
There's another picture.
Yeah, that gives you an idea how that worked.
Yeah.
And you can see at the cabinets that are on the walls that display the trains. There's one wall of just HO trains.
Next.
This is a water tower.
Yeah.
You always need water towers, right? With
Gotta have-
steam engines.
gotta
Gotta
have
have
a
water tower. So when we were having this house built, we were living in Richmond with my son, my younger son, and his wife was pregnant, and she had a little girl, and so little Catherine, who's now 15, little Catherine was born, and Christine was feeding her Similac, which is a powdered milk.
Yeah.
And so she had a powdered milk container sitting on the kitchen counter. And I said, geez, that looks like a water tower. So I took that. I kind of had to, again, imagineer it, because the Rio Grande had 50,000 gallon water tanks, and then they had like a 10,000 gallon water tank. And so I kind of made it an in-between, like a 24,000 gallon water tank. And it is not completely vertical. The bottom is out about a foot more in diameter than the top. So it is tapered. All of those individual boards are tapered.
Okay.
So that you can get, and yeah, that was a hard thing to do, because how much do you taper? You had to do each one at a time to make sure that everything came up completely vertical.
Yeah.
All right. And this one works. I actually have a switch motor in there that and it's controlled by a DCC stationary decoder. So when I hit function 40, when I hit switch 403, that water tower, that spout comes down.
But the water doesn't come out, does it,
Oh,
Charlie?
no, water doesn't come out. You hear the water, because I time it with the water fill on a tsunami decoder. So when you hit F9 on a Tsunami 1 decoder, you get what they call water fill. So you hear a clank, and then you hear water running. And then you hear all that water running, and then you have to run to the bathroom.
Charlie, if you had told me that actual water came out of that thing,
No.
I was going to quit modeling forever.
No, thank you. No, you can't model water, because water doesn't model well.
Yeah.
It really doesn't, because of the size of the molecules.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work well, I mean, I thought about using water in one of the streams, to build the whole stream out of epoxy and resin, and then and as a trough, and then you can have water running down the trough, and then let it recycle. I thought about it, and then I said no.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Too much. It just won't work.
Yeah, I don't think so. It's hard enough to get the weights to go up and down the right way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, because the weights don't translate in size either.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, this is fancy. This is an engine too that I kind of liked. This is a C&J C39 consolidation. It has 63-inch drivers, and it's on a Bowser Penline Pennsy H9 mechanism. And it's the brass mechanism that had because for a few years in the early 1980s, Bowser was making brass mechanisms for their 280s, their 442s, and they also did the L1, and they did the K4 Pacific instead of the Zamek frame. So it has the brass frame, but I scratch built all the rest of it. And I actually took this to, I had a conductor when I was commuting back and forth to New York every day on the Jersey Transit. He remembers working, the conductor remembers working for the C&J, and he worked what they call the Jersey Southern route from Red Bank to down to Cape May. And he said that he remembers riding behind 683, one of the C&J Camelback 280s, the 280s that they had. And so I actually, I took this engine to him one day, and I showed it to him, and he said, "Yeah, you really captured the engine." Because they were wiggle bugs. They were very interesting because normally the Camelback, the cab butts up against the beginning of the firebox.
Huh?
Okay, but this one, the cab stopped at the smoke box, and there was a space between the end of the cab and where the firebox started. So it was an interesting locomotive, very different.
Beautiful model. Beautiful.
You know, it's a little crude, but
Yeah.
that's the other side of it. You
Yeah.
know, again, very early. I did this in I think 85, 86.
Yeah. Next.
Oh, and this is another interesting. This is also a C&J. It's a C&J C41, which was their larger consolidation. And there wasn't the other one was larger. The 41 had more tractive effort because they had 57-inch drivers. Now, you can see that the underframe is not painted. All right. The reason the underframe isn't painted is because that underframe is really a PFM Santa Fe consolidation. All right. And the boiler and cab is really a Red Bull 460 Camelback. All right. And it fits perfectly, absolutely perfectly. And it does model a C41 consolidation on the Central Jersey.
Beautiful. Beautiful modeling.
Yes. Oh yeah, passenger cars. You in order to get MMR or a car builder achievement, you have to build at least one passenger car that has merit awards, and this is one of those. It's a basic body kit from LaBelle, where they give you if the body isn't built, you have to build the body. So it's kind of like scratch building, but they give you all the wood that you have to scratch build into a body. And but that's really highly detailed. I mean, that's a brass strip that you see across the bottom.
Mhm.
All right, and that was a protective strip so that the guys who had the wheelers and the tow motors and the stuff wouldn't bang into the wood siding.
Right.
They had but that's a brass strip, like 5,000 or 4,000 thick brass, with rivet detail that I punched. You can barely see it, but there is tiny rivets in there. So that won an award for best passenger car and one convention, and it has an interior and it's sliding doors, and it's part of it's on the regular passenger train. It's my regular baggage car, simple little baggage car.
Outstanding.
Number 10.
Yes. Well,
I
listen,
didn't do the 10.
we're running a little long tonight here, but I'm going to skip a couple of things that I'd normally ask you, Charlie, and concentrate on a couple of areas that I really think our viewers would appreciate getting some information about. Charlie, when you build a model, take any model that you're building, when do you decide, you sit back, you look at it and say to yourself, that model's finished, I can go on to another project?
I really think that the NMRA achievement write-ups really help me with this, because that really helps you to finish the model. If I'm building a model today, in my mind, I actually go through the process of writing up the AP sheet, sheet for that. And if I can say that I'm ready to have the model evaluated, it's done. I'm not going to fool around with it afterwards, because that's how you best do it. Because this way you don't put it aside and say, well, maybe I want to add this little extra detail. Maybe I want to add this little thing here or make this change here. No, you can't do that. You've got to say, this is done, because you want to have done things that you can show.
Charlie, do you think that your models are pieces of art?
Some of them, I think. I mean, if you look at a model that I build of if I built a York kit and it's a pool hall, all right, and I build it as a pool hall, yeah, fine. It's not art. I'm just following the instructions and building it. However, if I take that pool hall and say, well, really, I think that this would make a better pizza place. And then you go through the process of making it a pizza place, and you change the signage, you change the interior, you add a little this here and a little that there, then it becomes art. The station, the Edenton station is art, okay, because that had to be Imagineered, or the brewery where you have all the modules that you use for the walls. But yeah, that's art because you're coming up and you imagined out this particular item, and that makes it art. It's the creative aspect of it. The more creative it is, the closer to an art form it is.
Charlie, how about a new modeler coming into the hobby? What advice, what tips would you give them to start building?
Well, I would tell them to start working with other people, and you can really start working with other people when you join groups like the NMRA, or you join a club that has other talented modelers in. Find out what you really like to do, and that's with anything in life. Find out what you really like to do, then everything's a pleasure in life. So, and find out what you really like to do, and then get the help that it takes. Learn to listen to what the other modelers have to, because their advice is excellent. I mean, their advice says, well, you're going to get a modeler says, you're going to build here this Ambroid kit, and you know what? And you want to stain the wood, so you want to have a stained wood so it looks like weathered. So I say, so do all the stains beforehand. Put all the nail marks and the stuff in before you start gluing the first piece together. So listen to what the other modelers have to tell you. Get involved with groups, because getting involved is, I mean, I can't tell you how important that is. And it's a fabulous aspect of our whole hobby.
Well, listen, we're about to come to a close tonight. So I'd like to ask the three friends that joined you this evening for their last comments or suggestions, or whatever they'd like to say to close this out for us. So let me start with Jack. Jack, thanks so much for being here this evening. Do you have any final thoughts?
Sure. Two, we didn't get a chance to touch on the coal dock that I built, the fine scale miniatures coal dock. But it was Charlie's mentoring that allowed me to address the lack of conformity of a prototype on that particular model. And after putting so many hours into that kit, I was, stumbling around trying to figure out how the heck am I going to get my 88 points in this with no conformity points. And it was Charlie's consulting that really gave me advice as to how I can make a few scratch built changes to get that, and that model ended up with 105 points in the scoring. So thank you, Charlie, for that. And the other thing I'd like to ask is, Charlie is probably the most prolific recruiter of the NMRA and our particular division that I have ever met, and I've been involved with the division for 18 years now, since 2005. And whenever there's a need for a volunteer, Charlie's the first one there. Whenever there's an event going on, Charlie loves cars and driving, so he'll have a carload. He'll have a carpool full of people going with him somewhere. And I would say that most of the new folks that have joined our division within the past couple of years have somehow or other had some connection to Charlie Rausch.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we got Tom, and we got Kevin and Bill Pacala, and now even Neil. So, I mean, I'm thrilled.
Yeah.
Well, Jack, thanks so very much for being here with us tonight. You really added a lot to the show, and I can't thank you enough.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Charlie.
You're welcome.
John, how about you? You have any final thoughts?
One final thought, which is a personal compliment very much for Charlie. And if you could sum up his capabilities and his enthusiasm for him, I have to say he's the Energizer Bunny of our group. I mean, he's always coming up with ideas. He's always doing everything he can to promote the hobby. And I'll very much second what Charlie had to say about, if you do your own work, you work in a vacuum. If you really want to improve your work, you find a mentor, somebody like Charlie, who will actually say, well, wait a minute, let's take a look at this and let's look at some realistic prototype photos. And just like what he did with Jack with the cold dock, makes a huge difference. That's the type of stuff you need to advance in this hobby. And no slight towards the publication world, but you're not always going to get that out of a monthly publication or other things like that. You get it really by joining a crew. And that's where I think people in our group have made a huge difference for everybody else who's been involved with it. And I can't thank Charlie enough for being my mentor with a lot of stuff and partner in crime with a lot of stuff too.
There we go.
Well, John, thanks so very much for being here with us.
You're welcome. And thank you, Charlie.
Thank you, buddy. Thank you. I appreciate it.
And Bill, how about yourself?
First, I want to thank you for letting me be part of this, Charlie. I think it's a privilege to hang out with you and stuff. I find that Charlie's is the most generous and, like the other guys have said, encouraging modeler that I know and stuff. He is willing to help out anybody and to encourage anybody, and that's just a major plus in his feather in his hat, so to speak. And I thank you for the things you've encouraged me with, including the brass pieces that we'll build one day.
Okay.
And
my pleasure.
Yeah, and it's been a real pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Thank you,
And
Bill.
Charlie, now, Bill, thank you so much. And Charlie, now I'll give you the last word, sir.
All I can tell you is just get involved. I have to tell you, I got involved with the NMRA, I think around 2011, and I couldn't have met a nicer bunch of guys, and it really has made a major difference in how I deal with things and how things work. It added a tremendous amount. It's really helped my game. I mean, before 2011, I didn't think about becoming an MMR. I didn't think about, submitting the models for judging and all this other stuff. I didn't even want to get involved in boards of directors and stuff like that. I mean, that's politics. I didn't want to do that. But no, you know what? It's great, right? To work on, to figure out how we can make an Arduino clinic better, so that everybody is going to join and learn how to write programs in an Arduino, so we can have flashing lights or moving Santa Clauses or just moving switches or turning on signals. So we're working on that, and I just had a meeting with the Neuse River Club, which is a very large model railroad club, and they said, we want you to do a clinic on decoders. I said, fine, I'd like to do a clinic on decoders. How about we do it together? We do it with CPD 13, and we'll do it with the Neuse River guys at the Neuse River Club. So we have a great facility to meet on a Saturday morning, and I'll show them how to put decoders in the engines. Let's start doing that, because you've got to get involved. And I'd love to see it. And there's going to be some young guys there who like diesels. There's going to be some old guys who are intimidated by the aspect of soldering wires on a decoder. I think it's just great to do this stuff together with folks. That's what the hobby's all about.
Well, I couldn't be more in agreement with you. I'm a life member of your region, the MER. I can remember back before your division was even formed, because there were achievement program people in your area, and they wanted to become part of the MMR, but they wanted to be a separate division. And I can remember all those discussions that were had by members of the board at that point. Before, to bring your division into existence. And it's obvious that the success that your division is having and has had is largely due to those people back then. And this goes back to 2000, 99 and through there.
1998, Jim.
Yeah.
This is our 25th anniversary.
Yes, and we're going to celebrate that next month at our first Arduino clinic.
I think that's wonderful. I really do. And I forget the first president of your or superintendent of your division.
Yeah, John Janesco.
That's him.
Rick Allen.
Yeah, and Rick Allen too. Right.
Yeah.
And I just invited them for our meeting.
But those guys were really leaders, and they did back then what you guys are doing now.
Mhm.
And the people that were pushing forward and so forth, that they had a vision and they knew exactly where it should go and how it should be done. And boy, I'll tell you, they worked their hearts out, as I remember. So I'm so happy to meet a lot of you that are in that division and having the success you are. Charlie, it's been a real honor for me to be with you and your friends this evening. I can't thank you enough for taking the time to be with us. Thank you so very much, and best wishes for your continued involvement and success in our hobby.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for our show tonight. I hope that you'll subscribe to our New Tracks Modeling website, newtracksmodeling.com, because then you'll be able to get a weekly email that gives you the login links for our Wednesday shows. We have one a week, every Wednesday. If you'll also subscribe to our YouTube channel, then you'll be able to get advance notice of all of our YouTube shows. Everything that we do, we live stream on YouTube. The Thursday shows, you can only participate with us on YouTube, but the Wednesday shows, you can either join us live on YouTube or on our Zoom show, and actually be able to talk and be a part of it in a different way. But thank you so much for being here this evening. Don't forget to tell your friends and everybody that you know about our scholarship program and encourage them to apply. And again, until next time, happy modeling to you and best of luck.